Good morning, everybody. This is Dr. Sonia McGowan with Covenant Integrative Health. You'll see that this morning you would have gotten an email and you would have seen on Facebook that we're kind of going through a rebrand. So look for that information and enjoy our new branding. All right. So today is our talk about low cholesterol and complex kids. So this is a really big area for us in terms of what we look at for complex kids and finding out if this is a core problem and acting on it, doing something about it brings massive changes for most kids. So at Covenant, we always talk about how the why matters. Kids don't just have bad behavior. There are no bad kids. There are no purposeless behaviors, right? There's a reason for everything. And most of the time when it's a complex kid and even a complex adult, what we find is there's nearly always, like 99.5% of the time, there is an underlying physiological metabolic issue that's driving whatever the complaint is. And so we have to look for the why behind behaviors. So most of you probably already know me, but again, I'm Dr. Sonia. I am the founder and owner of Covenant. I am married to Shannon. He is the love of my life. I guess it's been about a year now. He has been retired from being a CPA. So that has been fantastic to have him home. We have two kiddos. We have Libby, who you see there. She is 22. She lives in Kansas City. She is a musician and is the music director for the School of Rock in Overland Park, Kansas. And she's actually getting ready in the fall to go back to school. She was accepted to the UMKC Conservatory of Music as a guitar student. So we're super excited about that. We also have Rowan, who is 21. He is a college student in Illinois. He is a theater costume design major, and he specializes in wig design for the theater. So it's super cool. And I always put this picture of him up from when he was a little guy, because he really is truly the reason why Covenant is the way it is. Because when he was just tiny, he had a lot of challenges. He didn't sleep. He had a lot of eczema. He had tons of, tummy troubles, food allergies, and then behaviors that went with all of that. And so we just went everywhere trying to help find someone to help us figure out why his skin looked the way it did, why he had, bouts of diarrhea all day long, why he was nonverbal. And I got shuffled around and dismissed and patted on my head. And, I was told ridiculous things like, oh, he's nonverbal because he has an older sister. Oh, he, has eczema because you're a helicopter mom. Right. So it was a lot of just nonsense. And so, I realized that nobody was going to help us but me. And so we figured it out. We figured out that he had a terrible yeast overgrowth in his intestine. And so that was the diarrhea. That was the skin. That was the not sleeping. He also had some pretty significant food allergies. So we had to be gluten-free, dairy-free, and egg-free for a while, a couple of different times in his life. But by the time we had him on herbs to address the intestinal yeast, he was sleeping 10 hours a night. 10 days later, he was sleeping all night and hadn't in over a year. So anyway, I guess I have a strong sense of justice, because it was just wrong the way we were treated. And granted, this was in, the mid 2000s, but, and things have come a long way. But I like to think that when families come here to see me, they don't get dismissed. They get listened to. We look for the root cause, and it's all because of what we went through with him. So, and then this is Ozzy. I need to put a newer picture. This was him when he was a puppy. Now he's a big boy. He's over 2 years old, about 2.5, and he's big. But this is when he graduated from puppy school. So, all right. So that was a little about me. All right. So symptoms. Think about your own child. Does this sound familiar? Selective eating, anxiety, and maybe some moodiness, some emotional dysregulation, big reactions to things that just seem like not a big deal, lots of meltdowns, tantrums, low muscle tone. We see kids a lot who are squishy, they just don't have a lot of tone. Poor sleepers, language delay, sounds a lot like my kid back in the day. And so these are really common symptoms that we see. And so let's talk about the lab patterns that I generally see in kids with these features. So low cholesterol. We're always told that cholesterol is bad. Cholesterol is not bad. So hang on, and I'm going to talk to you about why. So cholesterol is a waxy fat-like substance made by the liver. It's also in a lot of foods as well. And so there are different types of cholesterol. So you're all the time hearing about my good cholesterol, my bad cholesterol, those kinds of things. So cholesterol travels through the blood on specific proteins called lipoproteins. And so this is where you get the different kinds. So we have the LDL, or low density lipoproteins. Sometimes people refer to this as your bad cholesterol. So our conventional wisdom tells us that high levels can promote cardiovascular issues. Then we have HDL. So this is our high density lipoprotein. This is our good cholesterol. High levels reduce the chances of cardiovascular issues. And then we have triglycerides. You'll hear it kind of a shortcut called trigs. So this is a type of fat in the blood that's used for energy. And so today we're talking about total cholesterol, which includes HDL and LDL. So we're looking at total cholesterol. And so again, we always hear the familiar mantra that cholesterol is bad, but your child's brain is built from cholesterol. And so cholesterol has a lot of very important duties. So it maintains the integrity and the fluidity of cell membranes, particularly in the brain. So in our cell, we have to have it, our cell wall has to be stiff enough, right, to hold its shape, but it also has to be fluid so that you can let good things in and bad things out through that cell wall. And so you have to have cholesterol to keep that cell wall with as much integrity as possible. Cholesterol is also a big part of myelin. So myelin is that kind of fatty covering over our nerves, and it helps the nerve impulses move quickly and smoothly. And so cholesterol is also part of our neurotransmitter receptors. It's a precursor for hormones. So things like testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, cortisol, you have to have cholesterol to be able to make those. So here is a pattern that I have found over my years and years of doing this. It is kind of well known in the autism and complex kid arena that puberty is hard. Well, puberty is hard for everybody, all kids, neurotypical kids even, but it's especially hard for kids on the spectrum and kids who are complex. So what we have found is most of the time, these are kids with very low cholesterol. And so as you enter puberty, you have a greater need for things like testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, etc. If you don't have enough cholesterol to make those things, it's going to make puberty even harder. So one of the things that we always try to do as kids get older and they approach puberty, we're always monitoring those cholesterol levels to make sure they're high enough so that their entree into puberty is a little bit less difficult for everybody. All right. So cholesterol is also an important component of certain hormone receptors like serotonin and GABA. Now, it is pretty common for us to see in our lab tests that complex kids have fairly dysregulated serotonin. The reason for that, many times, most of your serotonin is made in your intestine, and many of our kids have a very disrupted intestine. So they may have yeast overgrowth, bacterial overgrowth. They usually have poor fat digestion. They have malabsorption. And so we've got to look at all of these different pieces and put it together so that we have enough cholesterol. So we've got good hormone receptors, but we also have to look at the hormones themselves and make sure that we have all the right building blocks for that. So it also assists with bile production in the liver. And I'll tell you, another pattern I see is kids who are complex tend to not be great at digesting fats. So generally their Their gallbladders are a little underactive. They don't have really robust bile levels. So they're just not good at often eating fat, digesting fat, all of that. All right, so cholesterol also helps us make vitamin D. And here we go, another pattern. Nearly all kids I test for vitamin D are low. So reference ranges on the labs say 30 to 100 is normal. However, in a perfect world, it would be a lot closer to 75. And I would say probably 90% of kids who I work with have critically low vitamin D. I'm talking like 9 or 13, right? So very, very low. And so when you kind of zoom out and think about how all these patterns work together, you can see how important cholesterol is. And then cholesterol really is an immune system regulator. It also helps modulate inflammation. And so we know, again, kids with autism, kids who are complex, tend to have very disrupted, dysregulated immune systems, and they generally have, just a lot of inflammation in their systems. All right, so cholesterol does lots of things for us. Brain and nervous system, very important. Hormones and development, digestion, and immune system. And so we're going to keep talking about this as we go through. So what levels are considered normal? So again, I'm most concerned with total cholesterol. And mainstream practitioners will say anything less than 200 is what you want. There are some labs that even have it as low as 160 and below is what you want. But what we know is that we need to be looking at different reference ranges, truly. So we talked about the transport systems. So the LDL, the HDL, all of that. Here is how that system works. So LDL transports cholesterol to the cells for use, and HDL removes excess cholesterol from the bloodstream. So you can kind of see where you might get why people say good and bad cholesterol. And then the triglycerides store energy and work alongside cholesterol for cell function. So see, none of it is bad. It's all required. Like, this is how we were made. This is how physiology works. We can't say it's bad, right? And so when we're talking about kids, what we know is that kids need more cholesterol for brain growth and immune function. And in an ideal situation, the body would make all the cholesterol it needs. And so when we talk about the levels of cholesterol, so again, the lab says normal is, sometimes even 120 or less. What we really, really want for not only complex kids, but really everybody, is a total cholesterol level of 200 to 225. So again, these are kids who are famous for low cholesterol, but why? Why would their cholesterol be low? So sometimes it's an input problem. They're very selective eaters. They don't eat up a lot of varieties of foods, right? A lot of the kids we see maybe eat 5 things, right? They want chicken tenders, mac and cheese, peanut butter, I don't know, whatever. And so sometimes it's that our kids are not good at eating a variety of things, including fats. Sometimes it's an absorption problem, right? So these, like I've mentioned, these kids in general, we see that they have pretty significant intestinal dysfunction. They have dysbiosis, whether it's yeast or bacteria. They have malabsorption, right? So they just aren't uptaking the nutrients that their parents are feeding them. Sometimes it's a production problem, right? So our body makes cholesterol, and if you don't have what it takes to build cholesterol, your levels are going to be low. And again, patterns that we see across these kids is that they generally have really significant nutrient deficiencies almost across the board, but definitely in B vitamins, definitely in antioxidants, definitely in fatty acids. So this is, again, one of the reasons that I look at nutrient levels in nearly all of the kids I see, because it's pervasive. It's across almost all kids. And if you don't have all the building blocks for your chemistry can't work. So we've got to figure that out first and get that corrected. Sometimes cholesterol is low because there is a demand issue. So if a child has, recurrent or chronic infections, if they have chronic ongoing inflammation, that's going to make them sort of use up their cholesterol faster. So let's talk about cholesterol and complex kids. So autism, PANS-PANDAS, ADD, ADHD, mood issues. So a study by Harvard found that people with autism are 2 times more likely to have abnormal cholesterol levels. And another study suggested that they may be 3 times more likely to have low cholesterol than their average peers. So in my practice, it is so common across complex kids, and not just kids with autism, but, kids with PANS-PANDAS, kids with chronic infections, maybe kids who are just, having some struggles at school. They're fidgety, they're wiggly, they can't sit still, they're not sleeping great, they're not pooping great, but no overt diagnosis, right? It is so common that I pretty much do a lipid panel on every child who can tolerate a blood draw. And so let's talk about some symptoms of low cholesterol specific to the brain and behavior. So we will see things like anxiety. So, we all get anxious about certain things, right? And most of the time it's situational. It's appropriate for that situation. It goes away. It doesn't interfere with life. But kids really shouldn't have a great deal of anxiety, especially chronically. So these are kids who are anxious about everything, even including separation anxiety, sort of past the time when you would expect it or the age you would expect. So anxiety is a big one. Also compulsive behaviors, mood swings. We see a lot of sleep challenges. So when a kid comes to me with sleep challenges, I immediately am thinking, do they have low cholesterol and do they have low ferritin? So ferritin is a storage form of iron, and it will, when it's low, and it usually is for kids who are complex, it will certainly impact their sleep patterns. And then kind of along with that mood swings, we see irritability as well. And so in terms of symptoms specific to physical or developmental issues, again, we see the low tone. So these are kids who are real squishy. They just don't have very good muscle tone. We will also see delayed puberty, but now you understand why, right? If we know that cholesterol is the precursor, you got to have it to make things like estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. If you don't have enough cholesterol to make those things, it's going to delay that process. Really common for us to see constipation, fat malabsorption as well. So when we, often will do a comprehensive stool analysis on a child, we will see that they're not absorbing their fats. They're just pooping it straight out. And then, of course, we see a lot of immune dysfunction because cholesterol plays such a big part in the immune system. And so I test cholesterol, again, in nearly every child, but this is not routinely tested by most pediatricians. And it's really not their fault. They don't know what they don't know, right? And so we look at either, so it always has to be a blood draw. And so depending on if we have enough blood, I'll do a complete lipid panel or sometimes just a total cholesterol reading. If it is a situation where I want to, see the LDL, HDL, triglycerides, I'll do that full lipid panel. All right, so how do we increase cholesterol levels? So we can do it with diet. So things like eggs and dairy, red meat, certain oils, shellfish is a great one. Sardines is another one. Sardines, and organ meats. So you can see why I'm an adult. I'm not particularly picky, but there are certain things I'm just not going to eat. So imagine, you're 7, you're not going to eat sardines, right? So the challenges are selective eaters, right? They're just not going to eat some of these things. Sometimes it's a food allergy and sensitivity issue, right? We have lots of kids who have allergies or sensitivities to eggs, to dairy, things like that. And so for most kids, just trying to manage it with diet isn't enough. Now, if they're pretty close to that 200 mark for total cholesterol, sometimes we do try to manage it with diet. If parent says, oh yeah, we can eat more eggs, we can, they're not particularly selective in what they'll eat. Sometimes we do manage it with food. So when diet isn't enough, again, because of the selective eating, because of maybe some malabsorption issues, maybe some, food restrictions, allergies, etc. Just that's when diet sometimes is not enough. And so I heavily rely on a product called Sonic Cholesterol. So this was created as an option to safely raise low cholesterol levels. It's made with purified sheep wool. It's the only product of its kind, and we can only get it from one manufacturer. So it's a great option for kids who can't or won't eat eggs or other high cholesterol foods. It does come as a capsule, but it is easy to open and mix into things. I have moms, they're geniuses, right? They get it all figured out, but it mixes really well in juice, especially if you use like a milk frother to mix it up. It's slightly sweet, so it's not difficult to mix in to foods if a child can't swallow a capsule. So the thing about it, though, is that it does require a physician authorization. And so because it's designed to support optimal levels, you have to work with a doctor who's monitoring the levels, because we don't want to go overboard, right? We want that perfect little window of 200, 225 right in there. We don't want a total cholesterol of 400, right? That's not helpful. So we monitor it regularly because the dose of the Sonic Cholesterol depends on the blood level. So a family has to have a physician authorization in order to get this product. So using Sonic Cholesterol, addressing low cholesterol levels, what have I seen in my patients? So across the board, I generally will see better sleep. I see more stable mood. So less of the, falling out over nothing, less of the tantrums. We generally see an improved mood in general. So less of that, again, flying off the handle, irritability, mood swings. I also see pretty dramatic increases in language for a lot of kids. I see less reactivity. So they just have better coping skills in general. We see better focus. We also see improved development. So cognitive development, gross motor, fine motor, all of those things are features that we often see improve with a child. So are you concerned about your child? So if you are seeing that your kid seems to fit this pattern, it's definitely something that we can take a look at. So I will always test. I don't guess, right? I base our interventions on what the data tells us. I try to identify why cholesterol is low. So do they have deficiencies? Do they have fat malabsorption? Do they have intestinal malabsorption because of yeast or bacteria? So we don't just say, oh gosh, they have low cholesterol, here we go. We keep looking deeper until we can, sort of figure out the why behind the low cholesterol. We work at raising those levels safely at a good steady pace. And then of course we monitor it over time. So I tend to repeat blood work about every 3 months or so, depending on the child and their interventions and their progress that they're making. But I do monitor this over time to make sure that we are being responsible with the dosing on the Sonic Cholesterol. So we are taking new patients, both kids and adults, we see for sure. And so if you're interested in scheduling, you can call the desk for sure. The very best way, though, to reach Brittany, who does all my scheduling, is to email her. So Brittany@covenantwellness.net. That's the very best way to get on my schedule. So a couple of things to tell you coming up. And if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A box on the right, and I'm happy to answer those. But in the meantime, so I do a webinar generally every month. This year I've backed off a little, and I think I'm only doing maybe 8 or 9 instead of 12. But in May, my webinar is on PANS and PANDAS, and it will be Friday, May 8th at 9 a.m. And then in May, we also have a Facebook Live event. I also do several of these a year. So I invite a parent, or I invite, someone from a trusted referral partner to talk about their challenges or their services. And so this is April. So in May, on Monday, May 11th, I'm having a Facebook Live event at 1 p.m. with a family, actually a mom. Her name is Bethany Pringer. we have worked with her family extensively, and she's just going to talk about kind of particularly her husband, herself, and her daughter, how things were and why they came to me and how things have changed for them. So I think it'll be something that you will get a lot of value from and that will be worth your time. So again, the May webinar on Pans Pandas is on May 8th, which is a Friday. And then the Facebook Live event will be May 11th with Brittany Pringer. So, sorry, not Brittany, Bethany. I have not had any caffeine this morning. So sorry, Bethany Pringer. So very good. Well, it looks like we don't have any questions. So, oh, wait, maybe we do. Hold on. Yeah, here's Laura. Hi, Laura. Thank you for being so terrific at blood draws. My rolling vein son is now even considering donating blood. Okay, so I'll take that compliment. Yes, thank you, Laura. So we are very good at drawing blood here. I'm the person who does it with support from my staff. So even kiddos who just aren't very sure, maybe pretty scared, and even some adults, there are lots of adults who don't like it done either. But we're very good at it. And we have lots of ways to support a child through this. We're patient. We give a lot of prediction. We don't lie about what's going to happen. Oh, no, this isn't going to hurt. We never say that, right? But we explain the process. We support them in a way that helps them be successful. So, yeah, so we're pretty proud of the work we do here. So, all right, guys. Well, I hope you learned a little bit about cholesterol. It's a very big deal for complex kids and adults too. And so, yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. And I will see you next month at our webinar about Pans and Pandas. All right, guys, have a great weekend. Talk soon.